Welcome to Silicon Valley Asian Business Talk.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rajat Chen, a professor at the University of San Francisco Center for Business Studies and Innovation in Asia Pacific, and short for CBSI AP. Today, first, we want to thank the Facebook House for hosting this event. This is a very, very special venue for us to do this interview. And we also want to thank you, Raj, for coming to our interview program. And would you please briefly introduce yourself before we start the conversation?
Yeah, thanks, Roger, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So I'll give a quick introduction about myself. I'm originally born in Toronto, Canada. I grew up around the world in different countries, Abu Dhabi and UK. Parents originally came from India. And I went to Waterloo undergrad, did engineering and economics there. In my last year, Waterloo is where I came up with the idea for the company that eventually became Lyft, and started working with my co-founders there, Logan, John, and other folks. I also got into this program in the US. It's a PhD MBA program at MIT, very unique program. Only 4 people in the world were accepted into it. So I felt, it was a great opportunity. It was a full ride at MIT. I started my program there at MIT, but I realized it was nothing compared to the thrill of startup. So I dropped out, and began working, on my entrepreneurial career. And this was in 2008, the absolute bottom of the stock market, the biggest part of the recession in the fall. Everyone thought I was absolutely crazy, but I was ready to be hopeless. I was ready to do whatever I needed to do to make this, make startups work. And it turned out to be a great time to start a company. And so that's how it started. I started another company called Presto, which became the market leader for AI and automation in the restaurant space, working with big restaurant chains like Applebee's and Chili's, Denny's, Red Lobster, Del Taco, and Jack in the Box, those types of big
And you eventually went for a public,
I went public in 2022. And I left shortly thereafter, and since then I've started 2 new companies. One is called Lima, which is a mission-driven organization I've started with my wife to help skilled immigrants come to the U.S. So we help skilled immigrants with every part of their journey to get visas and green cards, because the immigration system in the U.S. is a nightmare, and I know this as an immigrant myself, and having a lot of immigrants working for me. And then I also started another company, which is back to my tech roots. It's called Tribe. It's the next generation group chat platform. It's what I think is going to be next after WhatsApp, after WeChat, after all these legacy platforms, which are over 10 years old at this point. And so we're trying to reinvent group chat and really focusing on building closer communities online on your phone. So yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. I also have a podcast called Founders in Arms, and I do this with the CEO and founder of Mercury, Imad Akut. We talk to different founders every week. We've had some great people on. We had Aaron Levy last week from Box. We had Paul English from Kayak. A lot of great people coming on the podcast, and something I enjoy doing to contribute back to the community.
Thank you very much.
Seasoned founder, criteria for starting a new venture.
My first question is, when you have done several startup companies, and for the 2 most recent ones, like Lima and the Tribe, what were the factors you were considering, or the criteria you evaluate when you look at the new ideas, new opportunities, to make you say yes or no, I'm going to do it? So what's the thought process?
It's a great question. A lot of founders have very different methodologies when they think about what they want to do. For me, the number one thing that actually is my North Star is my personal interest. On what problems do I want to solve?
The passion in it.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Like, what problems really bother me that I really think that I can solve, and maybe are not problems that other people are talking about. And there's lots of great companies in that space already. So it's a little bit more contrarian problems. But oftentimes the contrarianism piece is hidden. Like right now working on GroupChat, you might think, oh, there's another company doing GroupChat, right? Back then when I was starting Presto, for doing, I had the idea of putting a tablet on the table in restaurants so guests can order and pay by themselves. And everyone I talked to said, oh, this problem is solved. We have these old Verifone devices, we just can take payment. And of course, it was nowhere near solved, right? At that time. And even with Lyft and stuff, there's oh, Craigslist has a the rideshare platform. So it always seems solved, right? But like it turns out that it's never fully solved, and there's always a better version to come up with, right? So, but I always look at it as like, is anyone really taking a next generation look at it? And that's what I look for. But most times they're not. Most times it's most companies and most startups actually follow each other. They kind of herd a lot. They do the same thing together. Right now, there's a lot of companies in AI, and they're all kind of doing. Some of them are really doing the same thing. Like just like slightly different ways. Um, and so I always look at problems that I'm personally interested in. I also look at like technologies that I'm interested in developing as an inventor. So like I like to invent, and like the idea for Presto came before the iPad came out. So at that point, I was like inventing a tablet as well as it was like trying to actually deploy a device at a table, and there was no such concept of a hardware device, at that point. And this instinct is probably not a greatest instinct for a founder because, especially from a business perspective, because it leads me to do more difficult things. I end up taking on very difficult challenges, but I still like inventing. I like doing difficult things. So it's been but and you can see that some founders are able to do it. Like people like Elon Musk are able to invent.
Right.
And catch rockets with chopsticks, or develop new robotic taxis or whatever it is, right? So yeah, invention is important to me. I do think about the business side as well. So I think it's important for founders to think about like business model and financing strategy from the ground up, right? Like, okay, if you're going to need financing for a company, like you absolutely need it because you have hardware, for example, and you're building robots. Okay, are you going to be able to raise that funding? Like, are you the type of person who can raise that funding? Are you willing to spend half of your life talking to investors? Because we spend a lot of time talking to investors, and it's not fun for any founder that I know. It's not fun. So, you have to be willing to grind. It's a lifestyle decision you're making. That I'm going to have to spend a lot of time with investors. Like, there's a company called Boom Arrow, right? They're making a next generation supersonic jet, right? And they have to necessarily they need a lot of funding, so you have to spend a lot of time like talking to investors. I think from a business perspective, founders have easier life. They don't need that much money to get a product off the ground. Nowadays, it's very easy to get especially apps and software. And you can actually you can start a company with no financing, and then actually become very profitable from the very beginning. Which is for a first-time founder, that's what I recommend. Because it now allows you to get your first exit, to get some cash flow without having to take a lot of risk and spend a lot of time raising money from investors. Raising money from investors is actually much easier when you're a later stage, when you're a repeat founder who has some success. Yeah. So you can take bigger swings on the financing piece. And also you have to think about who your customer base is. The customer base, as a founder, the customer base is your boss, right? Like founders have bosses and they're customers, right? And so if you don't like your boss, you're going to hate your job. That's true for employees. It's also true for founders, right? And so a lot of founders are like, yeah, this could be a good business, but then they don't think carefully about the customer and like, is that someone you want to work for? For example, like a founder maybe with no background in construction now wants to develop a product, selling to construction executives. Maybe they have no corporate background at all. Like, do you really want to spend your time selling to corporate America and executives which you have no affinity with at all? Like, probably not. Like you could. And for me, selling to restaurant executives turned out to be a problem long term because it was something for me I wasn't that excited about ultimately, right? Like restaurant executives are fine people, but it wasn't like a group of people I really empathize. I'm not a restaurant guy, right? So I find myself much more at home selling to consumers because these are my family, my friends, and people I identify with. And even though the product I sold at Presto was a B2B2C product, it was all consumer based. But I wasn't selling to the consumers, I was selling to the businesses. Some people are very at home selling to businesses. They have the personality to really be business focused. Some people are not. And I don't think I'm the person to be very business focused. So you have to realize who you are as a founder and what you're interested in.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
One interesting point I actually thought is when you look at the problem beside your passion, even though you think that space is, kind of occupied by some other companies, but you still try to see some differentiations, opportunities. Could you elaborate? Because if, for example, you take the company you're doing, if you look at the space, they are competitors, but you still think there are opportunities there.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, more than competition, what founders should look for are big markets, you know? So, I mean, you could, in 2005, someone could look at the cell phone industry and say, like, you know, there's plenty of competitors in this space. There's BlackBerry, there's Nokia, and like, there's plenty of phones around. They're great, they're cheap, they all work, right? Why come up with something new? So, like, you could take that, or you could look at cars, you know, in 2005 as well. You could say, like, oh, a lot of cars out there, good cars, you know, people seem to be developing great cars. So, like, I always think that, like, you have to have, if you're passionate about a space, there's always opportunities to make a better thing, I think, right? And what happens is, what I've noticed in every industry, in every cycle, is that, like, you know, there's something new that comes out, it gets great, everyone adopts it,
Yeah.
you know, and then the companies that develop that product get, like, fat and greedy and slow, and, like, they just stop caring, you know, and they have a cash cow that they're all riding, and they stop innovating. So that means that even though that they have a product, a good product in the space, you know, it's probably not keeping up. They're not disrupting themselves. It's just the innovator's dilemma. But it's so real. It's so real. There's so many. I've seen it happen even with my own companies. I say, at a certain scale, it's hard for me to innovate. You know, it's hard for me to change, put resources on the next thing. You know, so that's me. But if you have, like, you know, a corporate executive who has a short-term goal to hit their bonus, it's even worse.
That's true.
So it happens. It is so hard to fight that. It's basically like trying to fight gravity. And I don't think any company has been really successful at doing it. That's also one of the reasons why, you know, when I invest in like, you know, like, say, public stock market or public companies, I only take founder-backed companies or founder-led companies.
Yeah.
Because they're the only ones willing to disrupt it. You know, if the founder's not leading the company in general, unless the founder, you know, unless the executive name is Satya, you know, like, they're not going to be willing to, like, you know, disrupt themselves to get to the next thing, and they will be disrupted by the next wave.
Let me ask you follow-up questions. Do you have a problems or difficulties for VCs to push back on your idea? Say, hey, even though this space seems to be crowded, but I still see some opportunities there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, VCs in general, you know, I've been rejected by thousands of VCs. You know, so, you know, there's no shortage of VCs saying no to me. I think one thing that I've become better at over time. So VC, when founders are raising money from VCs, it's a volume game. You know, like, if you have, like, a disruptive idea, something that is contrarian, by definition, most VCs will say no because they're following the herd.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to be ready for a lot of rejection. That's actually very mentally difficult as a founder. You know, because you really believe in this thing, and when people are telling you all the time it's not going to work, they're not going to invest, you can't help but doubt. You know, you can't help but say, oh, geez, maybe they're right. You know, like, they've seen lots of companies, they've seen lots of things. So, but, you know, I think founders have to be tough and have to have their own inner compass. And that's why a lot of people don't stick with it. You know, they give up pretty easily after the first few years, because it just wears them down, just grinds them down. And but, you know, for me, it's actually been the opposite. When VCs say no to me, I get angry. I'm like, I don't want to prove them wrong. So that's
You're more motivated.
Yeah, more motivated. Yeah. So, like, you know, it's like, no, I'll show you. You know. So I think founders can take that and you know, use every rejection as a reason, you know, to push themselves emotionally. But of course, irrationally, you need to still think, you know, is this feedback valid? You know, I put out a tweet recently about this, but, like, you know, it's amazing how much more you learn about anything, any problem or any solution, by actually doing the thing, like actually building the solution and actually, like, seeing it work within in its environment, than by hearing other people talk about it. So most VCs, they just learn by hearing other people talk about it. They're meetings all day. You know, they're not actually, like, building stuff and testing it and, like, getting people's feedback and seeing what users are using, what they're not using. So their resolution is very low on these problems, right? So at a low enough resolution, you know, even a child's painting can look like a Picasso and vice versa. You know, a Picasso can look like a child's painting too. So if you can't really see what's going on, you're just everything's going to be hazy. So VCs have a tough job. You know, that's why they end up following the herd a lot. They're like, oh, the other person invested, I'll just invest too, because who knows? They don't know. So, or they're, you know, apologies to any VC.
I also like the idea saying sometimes, even for entrepreneurs, actually go ahead and do it, try it. You also give you lots of opportunities to learn because
Totally.
you see the nuance, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I see most VCs are missing.
Oh, yeah.
Piece.
So when I started Presto, I worked as a waiter in restaurants for, I spent my first year and a half inside the restaurants, building the product. My office was a seat at a table at a restaurant. And I would build the product and I'll be testing with users in real time. Like I'll be coding inside the restaurant and deploying code to the tablets, in real time and then see how people used it. And it was very disruptive. I learned a lot. At Lyft, which was Zimba when we started it, I drove the first people around. I was driving carpools. So you got to do that, right?
Right. So that's the very effective way for you to gain the real insights.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching.